Hello, this is Martin Brossman
And I'm Elise Archer.
and Greg Heyer is incoming on the road to us. So he'll be popping in the seat. Notice I have a little space here, and we're excited to have Dr. Brian Lambert back again on the show, and we'll be talking with him shortly. Brian, great to have you here.
Hey, thanks for having me.
And this is going to be a very exciting show about sales enablement and new things going on and how it works along with social selling. I want to begin by just starting out and mentioning our sponsors of this show. And our sponsor of the show is NC State Technology Training Solutions. Greg and I teach a course there on LinkedIn, and we've also offered other courses and social selling there. And I teach a social media management course, but they have all types of professional education, including all of the main applications, Excel, how to do mobile. I think they have a new one out on drones, photography for professionals in companies because they're doing more in-house stuff. And you can learn more about this at linkintoSales.com/NCSUTTS. That's in the show notes. So make sure to check that out and see what they have to offer. We love teaching there. We love the facilities. Shout out to Holly that runs it very well, and really enjoy being involved with the whole program. We have a number of new things coming up in LinkedIn, and we're going to let Greg focus on those. But there's some things that are going on, and one that I'll mention briefly in the news is Twitter is shutting down Vine. And guys, and they're also laying off 9%. I'm a little nervous about that. What do you all think about it?
I had not heard that, but I mean, Vine never really seemed to go anywhere, right? So I guess it's not that.
It wasn't a big player.
To me, it just seemed like way too much work to try to make a video that short. I had not heard about the layoffs, though. That's I don't know.
About 9%. Brian, you didn't get a chance to review this in advance, but anything you want to add to the Twitter scene? Because I'm a big lover of Twitter, and you've used it too.
Well, yeah, I mean, they have to be profitable, right? So if they're not going to get bought by somebody, they need a business model that works for them. And I know there's a lot of users, and it requires bigger infrastructure. So the next thing after that is the people side, and you might have to cut some people. And it's one of those things where I'm still waiting for the business model to emerge, and it's a great platform to get the word out and people use it. But investors might be wondering exactly what's the payoff.
Right. What's the ROI with it? And they've got to get that type of results with Twitter and Vine to be able to really keep it going. I'm a big fan of Twitter. We love it. And we'll see what occurs, but just notice it. That's just an update to note. I still see it's the doorway to the world alive. Oh, and we've got Greg Heyer here. He's jumping in. Plugging him in. He'll be here in a second. Come on down.
All right. Good afternoon.
Hello. So we're ready
Greg.
to go, and he's going to come on scene shortly. We'll turn our camera here and make it all work. Excellent.
Hey,
So
Greg.
Greg, we just covered talking about our sponsors and mentioned Vine, and I'll let you jump in with the other news today as well and take it on.
Yeah, very good. All right. So LinkedIn has launched a brand new tool to look at your salary. And actually compare it to other people that have submitted their salaries to LinkedIn for this purpose. So if you want to check that out, go to linkedin.com/salary. Pretty easy tool. I took a look at it today. Only 4 people were submitting their salaries for what they did in the Raleigh area, but you can kind of get an idea, like, should you move to the new area? Are you getting compensated well as a sales professional? Whatever the case may be, definitely go check that out. Last thing that was in the news is let's see. LinkedIn is also rolling out some updates for skills and endorsements, and this is an effort to help make these neat little features that a lot of people kind of make fun of because they really don't give it a whole lot of credibility, but you really should, especially as a social seller. But basically, when you visit somebody's profile on the mobile device, at this point, it will eventually be rolled out to desktop. You're going to be able to see who of your connections have endorsed this particular person for skills that you may find relevant. So it's kind of an interesting little feature. Now, if you've taken our free LinkedIn training course over at socialselling.training, you'll learn a little bit more about how you can use skills and endorsements to your advantage. But I think this is a good step in the right direction for LinkedIn to help. For recruiters, it could be potentially helpful. For salespeople, it could be really helpful, especially if you know that the people that you're dealing with, the personas that you're working with, have particular skills that are listed in their profile. So definitely be on the lookout for that. You'll probably notice it right now on your LinkedIn mobile app, and hopefully you have LinkedIn mobile on your phone. But like I said, it'll be coming to desktop a little bit later. We'll provide links to the show notes, links in the show notes as well, so you can check that out. And we are at episode 102. So look for episode 102 on linkingintosales.com. Did you get to the part about Twitter laying off folks?
Yeah, we did, but I want to hear your comments on it as well.
Yeah, sure. So in addition to Twitter closing down Vine, which is kind of an interesting story in itself, because we're kind of surprised no one has purchased it. Mm-hmm. But Twitter is also shutting down or laying off about 9% of the worldwide workforce. So it's about 350 people, and it's mainly focused in their sales and marketing teams. In particular, they're closing multiple offices in Europe, including Germany and the Netherlands. I noticed I have a couple connections on LinkedIn at Twitter, and I noticed that some of them had some of their job titles kind of switched around a little bit. So some people who were account managers before are now business development folks. So there's some shifting around that's going on within Twitter. This is an effort in order to hopefully keep the company going for a little bit longer until they find a buyer. Right now, there's no interest in buying Twitter. So I'm sure they're looking at ways to keep the company going because it is a great platform for free speech. But I also want to kind of point out with any social network, basically the social network becomes what you make of it, right? So everyone says, I don't want to hear about people tweeting about sneezing in their cornflakes on Twitter. Well, you don't have to follow those people. You never have to see that kind of an update. I use Twitter personally to get really cool, relevant information for me as a professional. I want to hear what people are saying about marketing. I want to hear what people are saying about sales. I want to hear what people are saying in the industries that I serve, and I can do that with Twitter. All right. I don't always have to hear about people talking about politics or what's happening on The Voice or any of those entertainment type subjects. I can definitely follow some of those, but I create my brand around what I want Twitter to be for me. And you can do the same as well. So as a sales professional, I encourage you to get on Twitter and start using it. It costs nothing for you to do. Yes, it is one additional social network, but the two most important social networks that you need to be on as a B2B sales professional is LinkedIn for one and Twitter for two.
And there's a free course till the end of the year they can get on socialselling.training.
That's right. Don't forget, you can definitely check that out. It's not a very long course, but it definitely will give you the basics on getting started with Twitter. Just go out to socialselling.training and go to the shop and find that course, and it is free until the end of 2016.
Well, Greg, it's time to bring on our wonderful guest today, Dr. Brian Lambert, and I'll let you introduce him, and then we'll dig into the topic of sales enablement.
Yes, absolutely. So Dr. Brian Lambert has been on with us before. I actually had a great conversation with Martin not too long ago. So we'll link up to the show notes and to that episode as well. But Dr. Brian Lambert is the founder of the Sales Enablement Society and managing director at Oxygen Learning in Washington, D.C. Dr. Lambert spent his career helping sales professionals become better at their job through the creation of the Compendium of Sales and his work at Oxygen Training. In this episode of the Social Selling Podcast by us, Linking into Sales, we will talk with Dr. Lambert about sales enablement and how it is critical to social selling success. Dr. Lambert, thank you for joining us today.
Hey guys, thanks for having me back. It's great to see you, and it's great to see you, Elise. You didn't make the last show, so I'm glad we could get you on as well.
Yeah, I am thrilled that they decided to throw me on for this one. Thank you, gentlemen.
Well,
right.
I took him out to dinner and he said, well, you said the beautiful, brilliant, and talented Elise would be with us. And I said, well, I lied. It was a way to get you to go out to dinner.
But it was the beautiful, brilliant, and talented Martin.
Exactly. Thank you. I resemble that statement. Anyway, very exciting to go into this. And Brian, I want to just start with a simple question, defining sales enablement. Would you let's start the show with that. And what is it? Why do we need to know about it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I get it a lot. And I think it depends on who you ask. You mentioned that I'm one of the founders of the Sales Enablement Society. It actually started earlier this year, and we actually are setting out to try to define sales enablement, not only the function of sales enablement, but the role of a sales enablement professional. And in our discussions, and there's actually over 500 people now in as founding members, and there are chapters starting up around the country. We ask the question of what is the function of sales enablement, and what is the role? And when we talk about the function of sales enablement, there are through our discussions and actually engaging in that with our practitioners in the field, we find there are kind of four areas or four flavors of sales enablement. One is around the HR and learning connection to sales. So talent, training, learning, et cetera. That's one flavor of sales enablement. Another flavor of sales enablement is kind of an administrative effort, an administration piece. The admin workload on a sales professional is pretty high these days. So what is that platform, or what is the way in which they can be freed up? That's another area or flavor of sales enablement. The third flavor of sales enablement is kind of the marketing and sales intersection with content, marketing, content, et cetera, in support of the sales conversation. That's the third area. And the fourth has to do with operational view, which is around forecasting, pipeline demand, et cetera, and how those folks can really drive pipeline and get visibility and reporting for sales leaders. And that's the fourth area. So when you look at it that way, that's a lot of roles. That's a lot of people. Through our discussions and talking to folks, and I help lead the member engagement team for the society. We find that folks self-identify in one of those areas, and they quickly realize that their definition is one of the puzzle pieces of sales enablement, but rarely is it the full definition of sales enablement. I think that's the opportunity for the function and the role itself. So when you look at those four functions, all of them are aligned to sales productivity. And sales productivity really isn't owned by any one person, any one function in a company. And so you have a bunch of people that take ownership of sales productivity, but then you've got the sales leader over there being held accountable for the number. And so he or she's the one held accountable for a number, but the internal fabric or supply chain behind that number is very fragmented, and everybody has their own view. They're not held to that level of accountability sometimes. So we tend to view that sales enablement fabric, or those four areas, all in service of sales VPs, and we tend to view it as a function that provides those services. So to us, it's at the society, those are the two positions that we've taken. Sales enablement should be run as a business within a business. And secondly, that business within the business should be providing sales leadership, sales VPs, valuable services that they need to be successful in a highly competitive world that they're operating in. And when you look at it that way, I haven't found one person that's running at that all four flavors, but we are finding people who run onboarding as a business within a business, the training and learning function as a business within a business. Maybe sales, operations, and marketing as a business within a business to sales leaders, and that's what we're meeting about, and that's what we're talking about at the society. So that's how we've started to frame it out. And I've written some blogs about it's not just about tools, it's not just about technology, it's not just about training. In fact, I would say it's all that stuff. Now what? And how do we move forward?
Yeah, because we're in this complex world where we've got companies merging together that were enemies before, and then we have a committee of 5 or more people making the decision.
5.4.
5.4, yeah. And it really looks more like the three-dimensional chess that Spock used to play than ever before.
That's right. And you have to navigate that, right? And I think that's the value of salespeople. I mean, I don't have to convince you guys of that, but I'm still seeing stuff out there on blogging, Twitter, et cetera, about the death of the salesperson. But when you take the fact that companies' business models have evolved, I mean, you guys are seeing that with LinkedIn. You're seeing that with Uber, Airbnb, Amazon. They're fundamentally changing their business models that drive a lot of consumer buying behaviors and patterns. And those buying behaviors actually end up inside of the companies that we're selling within, and customers have evolved. So now we have to navigate all that. And that's why LinkedIn is important to understand your customers, et cetera. But when you look at navigating the problems that those buyers have, there is no one function that really helps drive the productivity equation there. And that's two components. One, how effective are sellers at navigating that 3D chessboard, and how effectively can they do that? How quickly can they do that in order to identify opportunities and bring those through the pipeline? And then secondly, how efficient is all that internal stuff, all that internal mechanism aligned to support those salespeople, whether it's in finance, technology, operations, or sales. When you have companies buying other companies, and I'm involved right now in a merger acquisition, we're taking the learning function, and in that merger, sticking 3 companies together and elevating the learning function into an enablement function to run it as a business within a business. You've got all kinds of stuff happening. You've got processes are different. You've got organizational structures that are different. Technology platforms, measurement structures are all different. And by the way, the role definition completely changes. And so sellers are starting to really have a lot of wake-up calls, because the job titles that they used to sell to are completely irrelevant. It's now about what role do people play inside of their client companies, and they don't understand how those roles all work together to add value, because business models are changing. And I think that's a challenge that requires a marketing lens, an operations lens, understanding who your customers are, understanding revenue streams, understanding marketing trends, insights, et cetera, all the stuff that everybody talks about individually. All that is required to come together somehow in order to make salespeople effective. And sales enablement should be the function that brings that together as a cross-coordinating team, as a body, if you will, that arbitrates all this spend and all these activities to allow it to support a portfolio of sales forces. I don't think we talk enough about how sales teams are set up, and how it's really, pockets of revenue streams and pockets of value streams. All of them are aligned to how customers buy. It's not just the sales team anymore. It's the sales teams, plural, and who's organizing all of this, spend in marketing, operations, training, et cetera, against the portfolio of sales teams out there that are supposed to be navigating customers. And when you look at that, that's a big strategic problem. And, it's really hard to define to executives, but boy, do they get it. They understand that they're wasting money, that they're spending money, and it's not showing up in sales results. Everybody that I talk to, is even at the VP level and above, understands that there's waste in how they support salespeople, but they just don't know where to start and where to begin tackling that.
Yeah, excellent. You don't think too often about how there are multiple sales teams within an organization. I think that's with complex sales organizations like that, sales enablement must be a particular challenge, especially since they can't have this cookie cutter approach to how they're going to enable those sales teams with the tools that they need. But yeah. So I guess real quick question for you though. What are you seeing right now with regards to sales enablement and where they're approaching and the perspective that they're approaching sales enablement from? Are they putting the salesperson at the center, or are they really thinking about the buyer and the experience that they want to deliver to the buyer?
Yeah, that's a great question. It depends. The focus for sales enablement has to be on that conversation between buyers and sellers, I would say. I think you're seeing that with Challenger and other sales training initiatives. And even, Forrester talks about the age of the customer, et cetera. I think there's an empathy and an understanding of the customer view. But on the last show, I talked about my ask of salespeople. Can you talk about your problem that you're solving without ever mentioning your product? And the average there is about three minutes max. you end up with a gap. And most companies and the people in the company don't really understand how buyers have evolved and truly understand how they make decisions and actually how they work together to solve problems. So it's not just about finding an opportunity to sell. It's about identifying a problem and understanding how the people in the client company actually need to work together to solve that problem. So what I'm seeing is more of an awareness that it's not just about personas. It's not just about, relating to people. It's actually helping them solve problems and helping them figure out how to work together when their roles have changed, their processes have changed, the mergers and acquisitions have sped up, and they're in a state of flux internally. So sales enablement should be focused on those conversations, those seller conversations with those buyers to help those buyers understand the problems and actually work together to come up with a vision for success, to work together to figure out what the solution should be and could be, to work together to figure out how to communicate the value and the actual proposal itself in order to get started. I think the biggest challenge that salespeople have today is how do you get started with a customer? What are you framing out and how are you framing it out? And there's so much tactical stuff out there. In one of my roles with the society, I talk to a lot of society members, and they tell me that they're bombarded with so many point solutions that it's literally like 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle, and everybody wants to talk about their individual piece. The challenge that sellers have is if the company that they're selling for oftentimes comes across exactly like that. Here's 1,000 things that you need to know, and here's 1,000 things you need to understand. And nobody's really thinking about the picture. What is the picture we're trying to give to the sales team? And in this case, sales team A is different than sales team B, C, D, E. How do we portfolio, pattern that out? And that if that doesn't happen, all of it's on the back of sellers. And we're seeing this over and over again, that those who are truly successful versus those who are not. And one of the companies, one of the members that talked in the meeting of the society said that he's got like 12 sellers driving 80% of the revenue for the company. And so you end up with this gap between those who figured that out on their own versus everybody else. And it's getting worse. So how do you crack that code and stop wasting money is a real strategic dilemma. And there's a lot of companies that have struggled since 2008 when we went through the Great Recession on how do you penetrate an account. And there's not enough of a focus on actually account-based approaches and techniques to mine value out of an account. And it's still the customer, the buyer in general. And that does not help a seller be successful in that conversation.
So Brian, when you look at these top sellers who are doing better and carrying, say, 80% of the revenue, what are they doing differently to crack into their accounts? I know it's probably not going to be a blanket solution for everybody, but what are you seeing as far as best practices, strategies to do things the right way?
Comes from the membership that we talked to. So this guy that I told you about, he actually was working to create a Top Gun program. And he actually had to figure out who the top sellers in the company actually were. Guess what? That was incredibly difficult. There was not a list in the company that said who your top revenue performers are, and he couldn't get people to actually agree on that. So that's a problem when you don't have that visibility, right? So that's an enablement challenge. And I know you're asking me about the salesperson side, but when he pulled everybody together, it was fascinating because they didn't necessarily talk about products. They didn't talk about SKU numbers. They didn't talk about those solutions. They had a way to communicate about a role, a customer role, and what success looked like for that role, and paint a picture and a vision for that role of their customer. And I would net it out to say they understand the from what to what. They understand the from what of their customer's organization and to where it needs to go to great detail. Not I just went to their company website for 2 minutes and therefore I know their corporate strategy. No, they understood the from what to what journey of that business strategy. Then they were able to take the from what to what journey of the role, of the customer role and his or her team in relation to that strategy. So if they're talking to a VP of marketing or a VP of IT, they can make some assumptions about how that role of VP of IT needs to evolve to support that strategy. And then they can talk about how they align their people and their teams and their cross-functional teams to that future state. So sellers have to learn the from what to what view and be able to operate within that and be able to help their customers move towards the future state. And many of them, to be honest with you, the customer side of the equation, they've kind of forgotten how to work together. It's nothing against them, but when you have the whole process is changing, the org chart's changing, the roles are different, getting people into a room together is hard, everybody's remote, you got to figure out how to solve complex problems. You can't do it in a 1 hour meeting. You need some sort of sustained effort to figure something out here. The power of the sales team is to be able to figure out how to align people to a unified vision. And that's what those top performing sellers do. Is they become part of the team on the solutioning side in the pre-sales effort to solve the problem, and then they find ways to help the internal customer themselves articulate the problem, sell the vision internally, and they're investing the time up front before the sale even happens to help grease the skids internally and make it easier to buy. So that's what most top performers in that bucket were doing. And it would seem simple then to grab them, put them in a room and figure out what they do and how they do it. But even that's hard. There's not a common language. You know, the marketing people are like, well, you're not using our brand. This is not this. This is a 180-degree difference between helping customers navigate to where's the brand plug in and how come you're not pushing my product. It kind of frazzles the system. So that's an example, though, of the enablement challenge and how it shows up on top performers.
Yeah, it sounds like it's kind of a matter of not getting caught in the weeds, right? Just keeping that big picture perspective and viewpoint of, I like how you said the from what to what, and what are we really trying to accomplish here, and how do we not get caught in the weeds of all the details and minutia as we try to do that. Yeah. I'm curious for you, since I mean this is your field, you're an expert here. What are some of the trends that you're seeing right now in sales enablement?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, obviously there's a lot of technology trends, and I love the infographics that somebody has a lot of time on their hands and they put out all of the technology that's out there on a single view. I like to watch those go by every year and see that how companies are just popping up everywhere. So there's the technology view, and we could spend some time on that, where the technology's all headed. There's also the idea of the role itself, the trend of the role. Back when I was at Forrester, I worked with Scott Santucci at Forrester. We would search, and we actually did search the internet back then, and it was what year was that? 2009-ish time frame, and search sales enablement. Hardly anything out there. I mean, you're probably talking less than 100,000 hits or whatever. But now there's like 13 million, 14 million, maybe even more. So the proliferation of that phrase, sales enablement, is a huge trend. You could go to Dreamforce and see all the sales enablement companies there, and it's just a huge proliferation of we do sales enablement. That's a huge trend, and it's gone so rampant to the point where I run onboarding. I run onboarding for 2 days, therefore I do sales enablement. My job is to run onboarding, and I do sales enablement all the way to I'm a sales enablement person and I have a quota, and I'm doing sales enablement by going out and selling. I mean, it's really, really fuzzy. So that's a mega trend. And then in sales enablement, we're also seeing this idea of the sale. There's really 3 levels of sales enablement, kind of when you break it into a hierarchy. There's task level sales enablement. So I'm going to enable a seller to do a specific task, like send an email better. That's a task level view of sales enablement. There's kind of a project level view of sales enablement. So I'm going to implement not just a point solution to send an email. I'm going to go ahead and implement CRM as a project, and I'm going to do it end to end. And not only will they be able to send emails, but they will be able to do other things. Then there's a program level view of sales enablement. And that program level view, we're starting to see more and more, because that's where the strategic view of sales enablement is starting to pop up to wrangle in all those random acts. And the program view is very focused on providing services to sales. So I run onboarding services to sales. I run certification services for sales. I run getting in front of the executive buyer service for sales, et cetera. And that's really becoming more prevalent, especially in large technology companies. So there's three trends. Is that?
Yeah, that's actually really interesting. You kind of shocked me when you said, I'm in sales enablement, but I have a quota and I have to sell. So that kind of, because usually you would think of sales enablement as more of that support role.
Yeah, so that's why this is one of the reasons I think the timing of the Sales Enablement Society is important, because the proliferation of those two words stuck together has now just completely gone rampant. I could go on and on with other stories, but I thought that was the most shocking of when I came across it. Was a guy came to our meeting and said, I just got an interview to do sales enablement, but they told me I had a quota. That's shocking to me, just like what you said. But let's look at it. Hiring managers and recruiting folks don't know what sales enablement is. I mean, we can't even explain it ourselves most of the time, and we've spent a lot of time trying to structure it up here on this podcast and this video that we're doing here. But a lot of companies haven't taken the time to define it, nor have they decided to be a function. It's not really a function. It's more of a philosophy or a task. And therefore, the resumes have started to proliferate of, this is the tasks I do. These are my philosophies about sales enablement. These are my training certifications I've gotten. So we've kind of jumbled it on our resumes, which has confused the hiring process. So sales leaders aren't exactly sure what they're getting when they hire a sales enablement leader, but they look at their background and say, let me try that. And I think that's dangerous for all of us because it's a little bit of a crapshoot. And 4 or 5 years ago, Scott Santucci actually posted a blog on LinkedIn. He talked about, what is the market for sales enablement? Do we even have a market? Is there a clear role? Is there a clear function that we're trying to sell to? Or are we trying to sell to an idea when we say sales enablement? And I think these are important distinctions. Obviously, I believe it's a function. I believe it's a role. But if I flip it around and ask who's looking for the function, who's looking for the role, there's a lot of people that are looking for point solution tactical stuff. And when they look for the role, they're really looking for really a different name for what they've always looked for. They've renamed training, renamed sales, business development, or whatever, and call it sales enablement. And I think that's a bit of a problem for driving revenue, really.
So if we were living in a perfect world and no one had really messed up what sales enablement actually is, what would you think that how sales enablement would relate to somebody who is in a social selling role, where they are actively out there using social media networks like LinkedIn or Twitter to build relationships, to help enable a buyer to make a purchase or make a decision? How would you imagine that somebody in a sales enablement role would support a salesperson who is basically doing social selling?
Yeah, so when I look at it, so building off of the momentum here, if you look at the function of sales enablement, now we're going to provide services. Let's drill into it. One of the services could be, I'm going to help my sellers. I'm going to provide a service to them that helps them get in front of an executive. So whoever that is, we would have to clarify all that, but let's pretend it's a chief marketing officer. I'm going to build a service that helps my seller, in this consultative selling pattern, get in front of a chief marketing officer. And I'm going to look at it end to end. What does that seller need to know? What do they need to do to get in front of that CMO? Just that conversation, when you start whiteboarding that out, there's a lot of stuff. Obviously, empathy for the role. Well, where does that empathy come from? It comes from a variety of different inputs and sources, and social should be on the input side there. How do you understand what these people are looking for? Have you looked at LinkedIn and done a search? Have you read through all their profiles and skills, et cetera? And that's one source of many to understand and get empathy for the CMO role. Then you say, okay, well, now how do you get access to that CMO? There's a lot of stuff you need. You need to know what to say. If I wave my magic wand and put you right in front of a CMO today, what are you going to say to that person? If you send them something on LinkedIn, they're like, yeah, let's talk right now. What are you going to say? And it better be about them. So how do you provide a service that enables the seller to engage, to add value, provide a variety of different touches, that all build on themselves, for example, about the CMO's likely problems and themes that they might be worried about. And now I'm into a content thing. What content am I giving that seller? How am I aligning my value proposition into bite-sized chunks that they could use through LinkedIn, use through email or whatever? That's a lot of architecting work. We have to architect all that. We can't just say it's in your Salesforce portal, your CRM or your knowledge management system. Go find it, and we should provide a service. Our outcome here is it's very binary. Did the salesperson get in front of the CMO or not? It's a yes or no answer. Our service is to get them in front. We're going to sign up for that. So we're going to give them the content, the skills, the tools. We're going to understand what they need to know and what they need to do. We're going to code commit, and we're going to pilot this out, and we're going to test it until we can all celebrate and high five each other that they got in front of the CMO. We're going to leverage social for that. We're going to teach them how to use Twitter. We're going to teach them how to mine a lot of different data sources. We're going to invest in them and educate them on the customer's role, et cetera. We're going to pull, I've done this before, I pull LinkedIn profiles, and I'll actually say, here's 4 CMOs. Pull them off of LinkedIn. What's the difference between these 4 and how they think about their role? What's the similarities across these 4 roles? Can you tell me? Go. So these are examples of leveraging these technologies. So I don't think of them as social sellers. I think of them as sellers who use social to drive the outcome that they're looking for. And I think social has a role to play, especially in listening and understanding trends that you can bring into that. Building relationships certainly is one, in your own personal brand. I think you got to remember, flip it around. The CMO clicks on your LinkedIn profile, and I like to ask this question. It gets a chuckle. But does the CMO really want to see that you're the world's best salesperson who's been to the president's circle 47 times and you've hit quota 130% of the time? Do your buyers really want to see that? Or would they rather see a case study and give some examples of how you've helped somebody just like them be successful in their career, where they might want to read that instead of, your president's awards and how much money you're making or whatever, and how awesome of a salesperson you are. Maybe it should be about them. So I tend to look at it that way. I'm obviously in an end-to-end view of just getting in front of a CMO, and it's like, that's a lot of detail. And that's what sales enablement should be doing and helping, how they should be or could be helping sellers with, especially in social.
Excellent. Well, I think, let's see, how, let's see, what type of,
actually, you know what? Sorry, we'll flip it on you. You guys, I actually feel like you guys are more of an expert in social selling than I am. After I just went through all what would you guys do? So if I give you that little case study, what do you, was I wrong? Like, did I miss something? Right?
No,
you guys are the experts.
No. I think it's great. The first thing is you're looking for, is there a digital footprint online? If it is, what's going on? And what I loved you said is look at other people in the profession, and it gives you a level set of what's going on. If you're looking at one professional field and multiple companies, and there's very little content, that says something as well. If there's a lot of content, maybe they're in transition and looking for a job. If you see three CFOs in an industry and they look more like they're job hunting, that's something of value too. So that digital footprint of what's going on and how they're interacting, and then clicking on their profile to see what their latest activity. If there's none, are they engaging with people? I think that's it. And then also looking at what's going on in Twitter. Again, let's first, what we call start with social listening is what we talk about in the class. Let's first start to listen, and listen not just for the customer, but for activities around the customer. And that's where you build the stories. My favorite story of you of holding up the $100 bill and saying, tell me more than just pitching your product about your customer. You got to start moving into their paradigm, their digital paradigm, and look through their digital eyes. And sometimes there's very little, and sometimes there's a lot, and sometimes there are a lot by people they trust around them. So that would be mine. Greg or Elise, over to you for that.
Well, I agree with you. I had a question that you said, and this is what I took from what you said. I'm not sure if I got it right or not, but if I understood something you said, Brian, it sounded like you feel like there's a difference between social sellers versus sellers who use social to drive the outcome.
Mhm.
So did I get that right, that you feel there's a difference? And if so, I'm curious what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, good thing we're remote, right? We might end up, no, just kidding. Yeah.
I'm nice. I'm just curious. I thought it was interesting.
That's right.
Have bad thumbs, you would win.
Yeah. So what's the role of a salesperson is where I'm going with that. If the role of a salesperson is to use social, great. But I think the role of a salesperson is to have a conversation with the seller and obviously move through and have them buy something. And in my view, it's not only about social. So I have a hard time with social seller because it seems to imply that that's all you're doing. And I tend to look at it as like a pilot. There's a lot of dials, switches, gauges. I got to hit the runway. There's a lot going on. And I need the input. I need the feed. And I got to have the radio coming in if I'm listening. I need to listen to that. It's one of many things that make me successful in achieving my outcome as a pilot. So I tend to look at sellers needing to achieve the outcomes of getting in front of the right people, creating a shared vision, obviously making value tangible enough for somebody to buy. These are key outcomes of any business-to-business salesperson. And I think there's a role of seller, of social in that, but there's also a role of marketing, content, skill development, operations. There's a lot of stuff in there. And so I wouldn't call them a social seller any more than I would call them a CRM seller or a spin selling seller. I wouldn't label any of the salespeople that way. I think they have to have the content and the skills to be successful to achieve the outcome. And sure, absolutely, they should have social selling skills and wherewithal and the ability to use it in order to differentiate, to be positioned, and to keep up with evolutions in business. I think it's critical. The whole Twitter thing, I try to look at it every day, and I'm looking at where are things headed on a real-time basis. Every day, something's evolving. And I think in the 80s, it was like, well, have you evolved this year? Now it's like, have you evolved today? And I think Twitter and social is good for that as an input.
Yeah. But,
Got it.
Did you guys agree? Is that helpful? Or
Yeah, I agree.
I think that's helpful. From our perspective, we view social selling just as a different technique than using traditional sales. It is a different approach to selling. It does still take into account a number of other sales activities that have been done in the past, but the philosophy kind of changes around a little bit when you put the buyer at the center of the buyer's journey instead of the sales cycle all the time, and you're putting your buyer first and ahead of you, and the organization does as well. And there's also I think it addresses the mentality that sales has had ever since pretty much sales has begun of closing everything all the time, and with social selling. I had a post about this in 2014. It's on my LinkedIn profile. Or social selling is about opening, not closing. I think that philosophy kind of changes the shift because sales has traditionally been the department within the organization that's trying to close everything, and you have every other department within the organization is trying to keep things open. So that's where we're kind of asking sales to kind of think in a different way. The data points that LinkedIn has put out and other organizations has put out as well definitely shows that when you're those who are doing social selling are definitely they're closing more business and reaching quota faster and more often than those who have been doing the traditional sales. It's not to say that sales enablement doesn't have a role to play in social selling. I think it absolutely does. Definitely through training, through content, through a number of other activities that sales enablement does have. I think that actually sales enablement is more important to social selling than ever before, which is very much the reason why you're here. So,
I'd agree with that. Thanks. Yeah.
So in essence, tell you what, why don't you tell us a little bit about your the sales enablement group that you started on LinkedIn, how people can find it, and then your next upcoming event.
Okay, great. Yeah. So Scott and I, we were on LinkedIn, and Scott was like, "Hey, I'm putting this blog out there, and it starts with I don't have any friends." It's like, okay, all right. Well, I'm a friend anyway. It started out with, "Hey guys, I'm traveling all over the place, and I don't have anybody local to talk about sales enablement with. Maybe we can get together." And so we were trading and some back and forth, and he's like, "Hey, when can you be there? Because I want to make sure you're there." And we just created an informal get together, but it kind of took off, and we ended up with 20 people, and somebody donated a conference room, and that was earlier in 2016. It was like January, February. So from that time, since then, the group has evolved from the DC area networking group for sales enablement people to the Sales Enablement Society. And it's incorporated now as a nonprofit in Virginia. We actually have chapters that are formalizing, and actually anybody can become a founding member for free between now and our annual event, which is actually next week. So you guys have some good timing here on I appreciate you having me on because next week on the 18th of November, we will be convening down in Palm Beach to actually have our inaugural meeting. And we're kind of treating it like the Constitutional Congress. We're having our members come. All of our chapter leaders will be there. So we have Chicago, San Francisco, and Boston that are chapters that have started. Somebody from London as well. They're all coming with feedback from their members, and we're basically crowdsourcing a sales enablement type of society to figure out what are our positions, how should we be organized, what should we focus on, what types of committees might we want to establish, and it's all going to be based on ideas from the members. So everybody is invited to come. We just go to the website, secociety.org, and you can fill out the form there and join us in Palm Beach, and we'll see where it goes. People are like, well, what's your plan? We don't know. Depends on what our members say. Where is this all headed? I don't know. Depends on what people want to do, and we want to be inclusive. I mean, I hope through this discussion today that you can see how I've spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to bring all those puzzle pieces together. I think sales enablement has to become more inclusive of each other. And it's not so much about one way or the other in our puzzle pieces. It's in a way, everybody's right now. What do we do about it? And we're trying to create an environment where people with super deep passion and skill in a specific area can come into a room with 50 to 100 other people who are equally as passionate in their 100 different things and have a dialogue about moving sales enablement forward as a profession and as a function in order to support sales leaders better. And that's been a fascinating exercise so far for me. I've learned a lot from people. I've learned from you guys here on this event here, and I think my passion is really to try to figure out how to make sense of all that so that sales leaders get the help they need. I'm super passionate about sales leaders getting the support they need, especially since they own the number. I have a lot of empathy for that. So that's what it's all about.
I have to ask, are you going to take a older copy of the Compendium of Professional Selling with you in hand?
Yeah, right.
With that beautiful cover we did?
That was like our open source sales methodology, right? Yeah. And we've talked about this idea of perhaps we should put out some of these things that I've talked about here that I've learned at the society, the idea of it's a business within a business. Maybe we should give people some frameworks, or the idea we develop services. Well, what is a service, and what does that look like, and provide that type of content to people. So we'll see what happens next week in our meeting. But yeah, that's giving back, taking the handcuffs off of it. Let's put it out there and not hoard the value. And that's the big thing about what you and I did, Martin, back in what was that? 2001 or whatever.
Yeah, something around there with the mission of making sales a profession. It certainly gave you a lot of experience, and me, of what if sales were a profession, and now it's going to the next level
for a profession, right?
Yeah. So I just want to point out to all the listeners out there, the name of the organization that Brian had founded was the United
Professional Sales Association,
which was later acquired by was it ATD, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's right. Mm-hmm.
So I think if anybody's got any experience about starting up a new sales society, or in this particular case, a sales enablement society, I think you're probably the perfect person for the job.
I appreciate it, guys, and I invite you guys to help us out with that. I would love to have
we look forward to
sales involved, and your expertise can definitely benefit the people in sales enablement, and obviously the sellers that they serve. So I hope you guys are along in helping create this thing with us.
Absolutely, we'd love to.
Well, excellent. This is a good thing to wrap up. Well, Elise, if you have something to add, and then we'll wrap up this show. We have one or two other things to mention. And this is just a start, Brian. They can go to the group on LinkedIn and continue it. We'll have it in the show notes. And our goal is to get the conversation on sales enablement going as well, furthered, as well as social selling. Elise?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, this is just really interesting. I'm on your website right now. So just to confirm, Brian, the event on the 18th, is that free if you're pre-registered?
Yeah, that's right.
To go? Okay, awesome. It looks like a really good event. So I'd say for anybody.
Like 60, 75 people registered. And actually, a lot of them are actually sales leaders. And they're super intrigued with the whole idea of actually having an organization support them better in their role. So it'll be a nice audience.
Yeah, it seems like great networking, great opportunity. And I love your mission to make sales a distinguished profession. Funny enough, that's actually one of the things that I work with a company called Southwestern Consulting Group. And that's one of our primary goals as well, is to make it something that is admired and esteemed and that you have to have certifications for, right? So love the mission and love what you're doing. And like I said earlier, I'm excited that Martin and Greg allowed me out of my box to be on the show to meet you today.
Excellent. Greg, let's mention some of our other things that we have, and we'll wrap up with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you very much for joining us, Brian. We greatly appreciate it, and we look forward to more, working together, collaborating a little bit more as well. So thank you very much. We have one real quick social selling tip before we wrap up here today. It's actually an app, and I came across this courtesy of Product Hunt. If you haven't checked out producthunt.com, definitely go take a look at that. But it's called Silk Prospector, and it is and you've heard from us a number of times before. Use Google Chrome, because we love the Google Chrome extensions that are coming out there to kind of help us with finding things online and helping us do social selling a little bit better. This one's pretty cool because what it does is that it's a Google Chrome extension that you install, and then when you go to LinkedIn and you look at somebody's profile, you can it will actually try and find that person's email address. So it's pretty cool. If you sign up, you can sign up for free. You get 50 emails per month based on your profile visits, which is pretty good. So if you're using LinkedIn for free, and you can pretty much the number of second to third degree profiles you visit, this could, I know the LinkedIn likes to put a cap on how many profiles you visit on your free account, but you get free 50 email addresses, and it's about 95% accurate, so sometimes they don't get it all. There's also a paid service where you can get up to 300 email addresses for $25 a month, but definitely go check it out. The website address is silk.ai, silk.ai, and we'll put a link to in the show notes to get that. So no affiliate link or anything like that, but it's definitely a cool tool worth checking out.
No, and I looked it up this morning, and a shout out to the chat. One of the co-founders said hello, so they said they were going to listen to the show. So very just cool. Saying hi to you as I promised. So good to have you here. And then, we're talking about training and needing training. And Greg, do you know where they can get some good training, especially the tools of social selling, the fundamentals of LinkedIn, maybe from some guys that have been on LinkedIn since 2004? Well, where could they get that?
He's been on since 2004.
Yeah.
I was still in diapers, but we have I've been on since actually 2007, but I would strongly recommend going, actually, I'm sorry, 2006.
Yeah.
I definitely go out to socialselling.training, and you have 2 free courses out there you can take. And we also have another course that if you want to learn about establishing a social selling routine, we have that available. We're also working on a new course, which is called basically the fundamentals of social selling, which is going to be this huge gargantuan course of nothing but goodness from our brain on a computer screen and video.
And hopefully some input from Brian too. We're getting that. But the big thing is sign up before the end of the year, because we're going to charge for these courses after the end of the year. So
That's
it's
a great service. I'm going to tweet that.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah, because Greg, you said we have to be on Twitter more, so I'm going
to definitely. Thank you for for reacting to my advice.
Excellent. We'll share it with you for it. But this is terrific. Great to have you on the show again, Brian. Looking forward to working and finding new ways to collaborate. And excited you could meet Elise live here. She's been very excited that you joined us. And this wraps up our show.
Thanks, guys.
Once again, thank you very much, everybody, for listening and watching the Social Selling Podcast by Linking Into Sales. You can definitely find us on YouTube at youtube.com/linkingsales. Or if you come out to our website at linkingintosales.com. At the bottom of the site, you can definitely find the podcast and subscribe to it on iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher, TuneIn. Where else we got it? We got Player FM. We tune in everywhere. Yeah, we want you to be able to listen to our show and enjoy it. Definitely subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. If you have any questions, you're more than welcome to email us at info@linkingintosales.com. We'll definitely love to get back to you. And don't forget, go out to socialselling.training and pick up those 2 free courses before the end of 2016. We love you guys, and thank you very much for listening. We'll catch you next time.
Bye, everybody.